Preece may not be returning to Stewart Haas Racing in 2025, and there's a lot of big silly season moves that could be happening down the road. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed for today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight those really quickly. First, going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just show them straight into it. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Riley Herbst's 2024 Terrible Herbst throwback to his family for this weekend at Darlington. This is a really nice looking throwback, in my opinion. I love the red color. It looks pretty good. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. And the only other paint scheme we're taking a look at is Dean Thompson's 2024 Ryan Partridge throwback that we'll see at Darlington. Very simple in my opinion. Love the simplicity. A really nice looking throwback. They did a solid job. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Buc-ee's. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday or Saturday, the Buc-ee's has secured 57 acres of vacant land bordering Kansas from a new location. There has been a lot of Buc-ee's been popping up over the course of the last few years, and Buc-ee's continues to grow in the United States. I think there's some outside of Daytona, if I'm not mistaken, and now you're going to have a Buc-ee's outside of the Kansas City area. Buc-ee's one of the biggest gas station chains currently at the moment. A really big deal. It's like a convenience store. There's a lot of great things. It's really exciting stuff. Glad to see the Buc-ee's is going to be expanding and having a store outside of Kansas Speedway. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Horizon Hobby. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday evening, that NASCAR has a new licensing deal with Horizon for hobby-grade RC cars for $180. The drivers that are part of this deal are Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, Mark Truex Jr., and Michael McDowell. I already talked about this on the channel about a week or two ago, but I do work in the RC and the hobby business. This is going to have some really cool parts coming out. It's basically based off, I think, on the Arma Typhon Grom, if I'm not mistaken, which is a 12-scale car. This is a really, really huge deal for the RC business. These cars will be coming out in September, and I'll probably do a video talking about these cars on my channel since I do work in the business. This is a really exciting deal. It's a really huge deal for RC in general and NASCAR having this partnership. It's really exciting stuff. And nonetheless, congratulations on NASCAR and Horizon on having this really huge partnership. This is really exciting and great stuff overall. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim. As it was reported by Trey Ryan, who puts out a lot of really good stats on his Twitter page, that Corey Heim has finished in the top 10 in 23 of the last 24 races in the Truck Series, including winning the Truck Series race last night at Kansas. That is absolutely impressive. In fact, I think Eric Esteb mentioned this on his channel earlier today, but I think he said 27 of the last 30 Truck Series races he's finished in the top 10. Corey Heim is having a career year and is having an incredible run in the Truck Series currently at the moment. He's been extremely strong so far this year. He has finished in the top 10 in every single race. He's only had one finish below 6 so far, and he's currently the championship favorite for the Truck Series. I think there's no doubt in my mind that he's absolutely ready to move up to the Cup Series full time. He was running really good in the Cup Series race earlier tonight. He's done a really good job, and I think he's ready to make the move up. Nonetheless, really exciting stuff, and it's pretty crazy to see Corey Heim continues to be extremely impressive. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about qualifying. As it was also reported by Trey Ryan that qualifying has now happened the last 34 consecutive NASCAR Cup Series races. This has not happened since 2000, which is almost a quarter of a century ago, nearly 25 years ago since the last time this happened. You think about qualifying, right? And we have had a lot of times where it can get rained out. The fact that almost a year straight of qualifying happening is absolutely huge. I think the last time might have been either Darlington or maybe the Coke 600 or maybe North Wilkes, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not entirely sure. But I think it's crazy to think that we've had 34 straight. This has been such a long time because sometimes you get qualifying sessions that are rained out. So to see the last 34 of those races happen or qualifying sessions happen, I think is absolutely huge and really big deal. Really exciting stuff nonetheless, and great to see that qualifying has been able to happen as much as it has been able to happen. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about F1. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday on Saturday that Stefano Del Michele says very few F1 fans who think F1 has become boring due to Verstappen's dominance. When I saw this report and him saying this on SportsCenter, I had to laugh and I was absolutely shocked by this statement. He is not living in reality. He's living in a delusional fantasy. Let me tell you something. I know today's race at Miami was actually more exciting, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But the majority of the last 2 years of Formula One has been dominated by one driver. Only 3 or 4 races have not been won by a Red Bull driver. And only a couple of those races have been won by the same guy. And you've only had 2 different drivers win outside of the Red Bull drivers. You can't sit here and tell me that Formula One is fun to watch. It's generally very boring most of the time. One guy dominates every single race, and it's just not been a fun time to watch F1 currently at the moment. Granted, like I said, I thought the F1 race today was more intriguing than normal, but it still wasn't the most exciting race compared to the NASCAR race, which we're going to talk about the finish here in just a little bit. But Formula One, absolutely. The fact that Stefano says this and says this with a straight face is definitely really frustrating to hear. But am I surprised? No, I'm not really shocked about it overall, to be honest. See, that Stefano's not living in a reality. He's living in a delusional fantasy. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Miami Grand Prix. Now, right during the NASCAR race having its delay for the Cup Series race at Kansas, you also had the Miami Grand Prix going on. And it looked like Max Verstappen was going to go on to a pretty easy win. But there was a crash that happened with around 25 laps to go in the race, and this actually handed the lead to Lando Norris, who actually pulled out to a 30-second lead, and Verstappen was not able to close it down. And this would hand the lead to Lando Norris. And I thought Max Verstappen was going to get right back by Lando Norris. But Lando Norris actually got the lead, and not only did he get the lead, he pulled away and was able to pull out to about a 7 or 8 second lead and was able to win his first career Formula One race. To say that I was so excited to see Lando get the victory today would be an understatement. I've been waiting for this day for a very long time, since 2021 in Sochi. He's been so close to winning so many Formula races for a long time, and to see him go out there and win the race today was absolutely phenomenal. Seeing the papaya go to victory lane, seeing Lando, after how close he's been, finally get that victory is absolutely huge. It's a real big, awesome deal for Lando. Congratulations to him on finally getting that first career F1 win. I think Lando's going to win a lot of F1 races in his career. He's done an amazing job. Congratulations to that first F1 win. He absolutely earned it and well-deserved win. Dominated the end. You got to dominate these races. He did it absolutely amazing and great job today in the race. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Kansas photo finish once again. Now, I already did a video talking about the Cup Series race at Kansas, but we saw one of the most all-time classic NASCAR races of all time. And it was capped off by one of the greatest finishes in NASCAR Cup Series history. It came down to Kyle Larson and Chris Buescher. Going into turn number 2, Kyle Larson gets a huge run to the outside, and Chris Buescher tries to wall him. They're still side by side. They're beating and banging across the line, and they come across the line, and it's 1/1000th of a second. Initially, we had thought that Chris Buescher was the winner of the race. But after about 30 to 45 seconds, NASCAR did the review, and Kyle Larson has won his 25th career NASCAR Cup Series race. This is the closest finish in NASCAR Cup Series history. To say that this finish was amazing would be an understatement. And Kyle Larson was starting to fade back. There have been so many great races, and really it's a tough break for Ford when you really think about it, because Chris Buescher was so close to getting it done. And I thought Chris Buescher absolutely had this race won at the end. He was in good position to win even before the caution came out. But Chris Buescher just lost. It's a tough heartbreaker for Ford. But to see Kyle Larson, who has a big month of May coming up here, he's going to be racing Indy 500, and he's got a lot of big events coming up here relatively soon. To see him go out there and win is absolutely huge. Once again, congratulations to Kyle Larson. It's an amazing finish. I didn't think anything was going to top Atlanta between Blaney, Suarez, and Busch, which, by the way, the final restart was caused by Kyle Busch spinning out. He got back up to 8th position. Still, though, very exciting race in my opinion. The photo finish was great, and overall, I thought the Kansas race was absolutely fantastic. It was a fun race to watch, really exciting to attend, and I'm hoping to be at Kansas maybe in the fall because, honestly, that race is so good that I absolutely need to be at the racetrack in the future. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lane Riggs versus Cam Waters. Now, if you watched Craftsman Truck Series race last night, you saw the feud between Lane Riggs and Cam Waters. So as they're coming to the checkered flag, Cam Waters is making his intermediate Truck Series debut. He got really loose on the bottom of Lane Riggs, battling for an 18th or 19th position. Lane Riggs then got into the outside wall after getting loose. And then Cam Waters went up to go ahead and confront him on the incident situation. But Lane Riggs was not having any of it, and he was really pissed at Cam Waters, and they had a confrontation over it. Looking at the incident wreck, I definitely think Cam was at fault for the situation, and I definitely get Lane Riggs for being a little bit upset for sure. Lane Riggs has not had a good year so far in 2024. The performance has just not been there. And every time he's had pace and speed, he's been involved in incidents and wrecks that really have not been his fault. Unfortunately, last night at Kansas, the race did not go well for him. And I think a lot of the frustration from this year so far has probably pent up to tonight or last night's Truck Series race. And what's really funny is that Cam Waters really didn't seem like he was too mad after the situation. But I can understand, like I said, why Lane Riggs was upset and frustrated. And what's disappointing is, like I said, Ford is still winless so far this year. And everyone thought that Lane Riggs was going to do an amazing job. And I still believe in Lane Riggs, and I think he's going to win a race at some point this year. But so far, the season for Lane has just not gone very, very well. Really disappointing stuff for sure. I'm not shocked to see the confrontation, though. Cam Waters basically said that he had a pretty shitty night, talking about Lane Riggs' night, which I completely agree. Lane just overall had a really bad night and unfortunately just had the incident with Cam there. Disappointing stuff. I'm not shocked about it. They'll probably talk about it and get over it in the future because they both do work with Ford. We don't know when Cam's coming back at any point. Nonetheless, so not surprised or shocked to see that Lane Riggs was upset about it because it definitely was avoidable. I'm not shocked to see him a little upset about that wreck and the incident. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Will Brown. Now on Friday, I talked about this on the channel where there's a lot of talk that Will Brown is going to make his NASCAR Cup Series debut at Sonoma, driving a 33 car for Richard Childress Racing. And it was reported by motorsport.com that RCR is in discussions for Will Brown to make his Cup Series debut at Sonoma next month in June. Will Brown, for those who don't know, is the current points leader in the Supercar Series. And what's really interesting is that Herbst is involved in this. Why is this interesting? Well, Will Brown currently drives for 888 Engineering. Originally, Brody Kostecki was going to make a couple starts in the number 33 car at Sonoma and the Chicago Street Course. But unfortunately, Peter Adelton, who works at Walmart and Mobile X, they had a falling out after it was announced that Brody Kostecki was going back to Herbst. And there's a lot of rumors also Peter Adelton could be buying in to Herbst in the future. But Will Brown has been doing a great job this year in the Supercar Series, like I said, leading the standings. And it's going to be really cool to see another Supercar driver come over to NASCAR. Obviously, Shane Van Gisbergen's come over in recent years, and if we've seen him do a solid job, which we'll talk about him a little bit with the silly season rumblings. We've also seen other drivers like Cam Waters come over and even Brody Kostecki. And I think that because an action car is kind of similar to an Australian supercar, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these guys come over. Now, what are the realistic expectations if Will Brown makes his debut? I think Will Brown honestly has a chance and opportunity to compete maybe for a top 15 or top 20. We've seen RSR showing a lot more speed, especially as of late, and I've seen more speed out of Kyle Busch. And we know how strong they've been at road courses in the past. Kyle Busch finished second last year, remember that. So I think that we could see Will Brown do a very good job. I'm excited to see him get the chance and opportunity to make his NASCAR Cup Series debut. It sounds like it's going to happen, and it'll probably happen in the not-so-distant future at Sonoma next month. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about superstars and Kyle Busch. There was an article that came out from the Kansas City Star, and Kyle Busch made a very interesting quote surrounding superstars. He says, I don't feel like we were able to transition a lot of fans that were fans of those drivers in the 90s into a Byron fan, into a Kyle fan like Kyle Busch or Kyle Larson or whoever. Kyle Busch is absolutely correct, and he's being brutally honest here when it comes to superstars and NASCAR drivers. You've obviously seen it. Guys like Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Dale Sr. transitioned the sport and transcended the sport into extreme popularity. There are very few drivers you could probably go up out on the street and name them. And most people would still name drivers like Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson and not Kyle Larson, and Tony Stewart, and maybe even Carl Edwards and Dale Sr., they would name those drivers off the heartbeat. Not a lot of people know who guys like Ross Chastain are. If you were asked most people on the street, the normal drivers, they probably know who Bubba Wallace is because of the incident. They probably know Kyle Larson because of the incident. And then you also have Kyle Busch, maybe. And then there's some other drivers, like if you ask Australian fans like Shane Van Gisbergen, but they're going to, maybe Haley Deegan too. But outside of that, they're not going to know those drivers. And Kurt Busch probably as well, but that's really about it. The sport's got to do a better job promoting these drivers, and I think it's also up to the drivers to promote themselves as well. It's a very interesting thing to look at for sure when it comes to the superstar stuff. Even Corey Heim talked to Eric Esep. He said that he's not a big fan of being on the internet, and I feel like that's one thing that's holding these drivers back, because you've got millions of dollars from corporate sponsors who are working with these drivers. And I think, unfortunately, it's hurt the sport in a really big way. Ryan Blaney kind of said in the same article that everyone's a superstar. Well, if everyone's a superstar, you don't have any superstars. I think drivers like Ryan Blaney and Bubba Wallace and Chase Elliott could absolutely be major superstars if they promoted themselves a lot more, which we've seen Ryan Blaney trying to do that. He went on the Kelly Clarkson show during the offseason with Dale Jr. So we're seeing a lot more of that happen. It just has to happen a lot more frequently. Nonetheless, it's very interesting to look at for sure, especially when it comes to that. It's very fun to look at the superstar side of things. We do need more superstars in the sport for the sport to be in a good position. We'll see what ends up happening going forward, and we'll see if we can create more superstars in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the charter agreement. Now, earlier today in the Business with Bob Parker spoke on multiple things, including Ricky Stenhouse Jr., which we'll get to here in just a sec. But one thing Bob mentioned in the Business with Bob is the charter agreement. According to what Bob said in the thing, he said teams are expected to get a new proposal at the end of May, at the end of this month. And NASCAR and the teams apparently met earlier this week on Wednesday, and there was really no deal finalized at this point. And Bob has noted that a deal is not close to being finalized. We have been seeing a lot more public outcry and a lot more public stuff coming out from the teams and drivers recently. Curtis Polk, in an article that was written by Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi earlier this week, basically said that the teams, if they wanted to, they could miss races if the charter agreement is not finalized. Denny Hamlin stated that there are 4 key pillars that need to be done for the charter agreement to be done. More revenue coming into play, a bigger revenue stream, the charters becoming permanent, and more money coming in as well. And Michael Jordan even said that the sport will end up dying if charters do not become permanent. And obviously NASCAR has zero on side. They're going to Every's team. And apparently what Curtis Polk said is that within the next few weeks, they're supposed to meet with 23XI Racing about this proposal. Obviously, this is a really big story because charters are a big part of the sport. NASCAR, I kind of understand where they're coming from a sense, because they don't want to make the charters completely permanent because of the economic side of things. We know the teams are expected to get a bigger share of the piece of the pie going forward. The question is going to be, what is that going to be if the charters become permanent? Are we going to see a cost cap come in? Because a lot of people in the industry say that if the charters do in fact end up becoming permanent, a cost cap might be in store, which would definitely be a little unfortunate for sure, right? Because I personally would not like to see a cost cap come into sport. But at the same token, same time, if that means the charters do become permanent, that could be the way for things to happen. So obviously this charter agreement is going to become a big story as time goes on. You're seeing certain sides come out and say things. You're seeing NASCAR say we're going to have a charter agreement done relatively soon. And then you've got team owners like Denny Hamlin, even Brad Keselowski saying that they're not even close to having a charter deal done. From what I understand, a charter deal has to be done by December 31st. Otherwise, that charter agreement will not end up getting finalized and getting done. It'll be very interesting to see what happens as time progresses and goes on. But it sounds like a charter agreement's not even close to being done, and we're going to have to wait on for a charter agreement to be done here relatively soon. Obviously, it probably won't be done for the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about mirrors on the next-gen car. A big talking point that's been going on for the last week or so has been aero blocking. And a lot of drivers commented on the top of the mirrors, and especially the rear view cameras. Kyle Busch actually spoke to the media at Kansas, and he says that we should ban the top mirrors and also get rid of the rear view cameras as well, like Kyle Larson stated. There are multiple drivers, even Denny Hamlin, who disagree with Larson at the time. He even stated this week that the rear view cameras definitely could be something that NASCAR works on getting rid of. One of the biggest talking points has been the air blocking side of things, and a lot of drivers do believe that using those rear view cameras has played a major part and a major role in getting that around. Jay McMurray actually on race day, I think yesterday it was, kind of disagreed with getting rid of the rear view cameras. Obviously, with the next-gen car, this car can be used more as a defensive car than an offensive car. We didn't really see that much in the Kansas race tonight, which, again, that was one of the best races I probably have ever seen in NASCAR Cup Series history. But still, I would definitely be for NASCAR making some rules, maybe outlawing the rear-view cameras at these type of tracks so air blocking doesn't become as big of a problem. But the biggest thing that would get rid of some of these issues, because you're going to always have dirty air on these cars, right? Regardless of what generation of car, you're always going to have dirty air. But the biggest thing that could fix some of these issues and some of these problems is up in the horsepower. We've seen a lot more of these issues when we've lowered the horsepower. If we could just up the horsepower to 800 or 900 horsepower, I do think that it could fix some of the issues with the dirty air. And obviously more off-throttle time, among other things, because when you have a lot more on-throttle time, you're going to create a lot of those dirty air issues that we've been seeing at tracks like Dover and even some of these short tracks as well. If we could figure out a way to fix this problem, I think it could absolutely help the sport in a big way on these types of tracks. Because this next-gen car, I think it should stick around. I know some have said scrap it and bring the Xfinity car in, but I think that regardless of what car you have, an Xfinity car is kind of like what the Gen 6 car was, so you're going to have those issues from that car come back to the Cup Series car. Because the Cup Series drivers just race a lot better than the Xfinity Series drivers. Because in the Xfinity Series, you have a lot of these drivers that make mistakes. To me, I do think, and I do agree to an extent, that we should probably find a way for this not to be an issue with the dirty air, among other things. Let's just increase horsepower like guys like Chase Lane and Kyle Larson have said, and it might fix some of the problems. But you're still going to have dirty air regardless. It doesn't matter at this point. It's still going to be an issue regardless of what car you have. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bowman Gray. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race earlier tonight, Mike Joy dropped a hint surrounding Bowman Gray. And according to Mike Joy, it sounds like that NASCAR could be racing at Bowman Gray in the not-so-distant future, as early as potentially 2025. Remember, it was announced about a month or two ago that NASCAR had acquired the rights to Bowman Gray Stadium. And obviously, once that was announced, a lot of people were speculating where NASCAR could be racing at Bowman Gray. Now, initially, a lot of people thought they raced the Busch Light Clash here, but I don't think they're going to race the Busch Light Clash because of the harsh conditions. When I saw it was announced that it was going to be coming back, though, I thought, okay, there is a chance and possibility that this could become the All-Star race. Obviously, Bowman Gray is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is not that far from Charlotte, North Carolina, and NASCAR has raced at this track many times in the past. The last time I think a points-paying race happened there, though, was either 1970 or 1971. I think maybe Richard Petty won there, but they've also hosted the ARCA East Series when it's called the K&N East Series. I think Corey LaJoie won that race, but drivers like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Bubba Wallace, among other big names, started their racing. I think Brett Moffitt as well also raced at that track when they had racing at that facility. Obviously, Bowman Gray is known as the Madhouse, and obviously a lot of people feel like that there would be a lot better racing at that track than North Wilkesboro. We'll talk about North Wilkesboro in just a second. But I would love to see the All-Star race happen at Bowman Gray. I think the racing would be fun, I think it would be very interesting, and I think it would be very exciting. So what happens to a track like North Wilkesboro? Well, I think there's a really good chance and possibly that if this ends up happening where Bowman Gray does get a points-paying Cup Series race, which I don't think it's going to get a points-paying race, but gets basic because they're obviously a stadium-like track. We know that the Coliseum's not coming back, but I would have to imagine that we would see North Wilkesboro get a points-paying race next year. There was a lot of rumors and rumblings during the offseason last year that North Wilkesboro was going to get the Easter date for 2024. Sadly, obviously, that did not end up happening. So I'm thinking that there's a good chance and possibility that Bowman Gray is going to become the All-Star race, if not Rockingham, because I think there's also a chance that Rockingham Speedway could host a Cup Series date next year as well. But if you want my early prediction, I think that Bowman Gray is going to be getting the All-Star race next year. The fact that Mike Joy mentions it, the fact that NASCAR has been acquiring it. I know that Ben Kennedy said they weren't planning to host an All-Star race at the track, but trust me, with the rumors and rumblings going around, I think there is a great chance, a possibility, that we are going to be seeing racing at the Madhouse for the Cup Series in 2025 because of the Los Angeles Coliseum being gone, and they want to change the All-Star location up for 2025. We've heard a lot of rumors they're trying to change it up for this year, and North Wilkesboro could get a points paying day as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, earlier this week on Thursday, it was shockingly announced that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had signed a multi-year contract extension with JTG Daugherty Racing. Bob noted in Business Bob that it was a 2-year deal, but from what I understand, it is a 3-year deal with JTG Daugherty Racing. The signing was definitely a little bit shocking considering the fact there's been a lot of rumors and rumblings that Kroger could be leaving JTG Daugherty at the end of this year. And it sounds like there could be an ownership change that is coming over at that team for 2025. And over the weekend on Saturday, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. spoke to many members of the media at Kansas Speedway, and he says he can't speak on what's going on with the sponsorship and the ownership changes. And there's also a lot of talk maybe that the charter could maybe go away as well. Now, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., it's a huge deal for him to sign that multi-year extension with JTG Daugherty Racing. But what I would be not surprised or shocked with if there is a merger potentially coming. We're going to talk about silly season here in just a little bit, but obviously when you look at Ricky Stenhouse Jr. signing this extension with JTG Daugherty, it is really huge for his career. This is the longest tenure driver that JTG Daugherty Racing has had. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has been there since 2020, and like I said, this will be the longest tenure driver if this truly is a 3-year deal. Now, what does this mean for the future of JTG Daugherty Racing? Because a lot of people are expecting that Kroger is going to be going to another team, and that, of course, is going to be Joe Gibbs Racing. And Tad and Jody Schechter, who have been there, did not comment on this, and also Kroger did not make any comments as well. The only people who made comments about Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s extension and signing with the team were Gordon Smith, who's been an owner of JTG since 2016, who's really excited to have Ricky Stenhouse Jr. sticking around, and also, of course, Brad Daugherty also spoke on this as well. What could this mean for this team? Well, there's going to be a new ownership change coming to my understanding. I don't know who the owners are going to be in there. We could see someone like a Kevin Harvick come in, perhaps. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a KHI client, so I could see him potentially that happening where Kevin Harvick takes over ownership stake in the team. KHI obviously has returned the last year, so maybe that happens. Maybe Dale Jr. somehow works with this team. Obviously, Dale Jr. has been interested in bringing his team to the Cup Series. Maybe this merger happens considering Brad and Dale have worked together at NBC. Maybe that ends up happening. And there could be some other crazy things that happens with JTG Daugherty Racing. I think it's huge that Stenhouse has signed this extension with the team, but the big question that is going to be going forward is what happens with JTG Daugherty Racing, what other stuff is going to happen with this team. Sounds like there's some big stuff on the horizon really, really soon, but what many people do expect is that Kroger is going to be headed over, and a lot of people think that's also happening because Mark Truex Jr. may be retiring at the end of this year. We'll talk about that later this week, but it sounds like there's some big ownership changes that are coming for JTG Daugherty in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR silly season. Now, Brian Murphy, who currently works at RFK Racing, I think is an engineer, put out a very interesting tweet surrounding silly season. He basically tweeted out saying, "Buckle up, NASCAR silly season is going to get wild." Now, tomorrow on the channel, I'm going to have a video talking about some of the true rumors and rumblings that are going on. But if he is saying what is true and he has a lot of contacts in the industry, there is going to be a lot of movement that is going to be happening. There's some teams that are rumored to be selling their charters. One of those is Stewart Haas Racing. Stewart Haas Racing could be downsizing from a 4-car organization all the way down to a 3-car and maybe even down to a 2-car organization because it's rumored that Stewart Haas Racing is no longer a Tier 1 Ford team. I know Chase Briscoe has dismissed those claims and those rumors, but many people are saying that they are no longer a top Tier 1 team. And I would also not be surprised if Chase Briscoe is out of the team at the end of this year and he could be switching to a new team like the Wood brothers if that ends up happening. There's also rumors, like I said, that JT Doherty Racing could have downsized, but obviously with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. signing his extension, unless we see new ownership change, I don't see much changing there. There's also potential that Kaulig Racing could sell a charter at the end of the year. Kaulig Racing currently has 2 charters at the moment, but they've absolutely been struggling in the Cup Series this year and this season. And I think that they should focus fully on their Xfinity Series program, so I think they're going to downsize. Let's talk about some teams that could absolutely expand. You've got 23XI Racing. Even though Denny Hamlin's denied this with the charter agreement not being finalized, I do believe that there is going to be a new charter, not a new charter agreement, but with that new charter agreement coming in, I think Denny Hamlin's going to be buying up a charter and expanding his program. We could see Corey Heim move up full-time the Cup next year. We'll talk about some drivers who could move up. There's also the possibility of other drivers in lower series like Eric Almirola maybe making the jump up, maybe Chandler Smith as well since he's the highest driver on Toyota's pipeline. And then, of course, maybe somebody get Eric Almirola, Sheldon Creed perhaps, and then, of course, maybe you get Carl Edwards or someone else out of retirement to drive that car. You've also got RFK Racing. They're looking to expand. I find that interesting that Brian Murphy tweets about this because I think RFK Racing is going to expand this season, and I think they're going to go after some drivers as well. Maybe they bring Justin Haley in full-time. Maybe Haley Dean goes full-time Cup racing. Who knows at this point? Maybe we see Matt DiBenedetto make the jump up, or even Frankie Muniz. Then you've got other teams like Trackhouse. Trackhouse Racing is absolutely looking to expand going into this upcoming season. You've got Zane Smith, you've got Connor Zillage, and Shane Van Gisbergen, who are under contract with Trackhouse along with Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain. I expect that SVG is going to be a full-time Cup driver next year. He's been getting the experience. He's been doing a solid and pretty good job. I think he's going to get moving up to the Cup Series potentially next year. And then you've got teams like RCR. You've got Legacy Motor Club who's interested. We don't know how much longer Kyle Busch is going to be around. But there's also some drivers that could be moving. Harrison Burton, I think, is going to be out at the Wood Brothers at the end of this year. And I've heard rumors he might even finish the season at this point. So we could see someone take over like a Chase Briscoe or even a Noah Gragson. And then, like I said, Stewart Haas Racing could be downsizing. Mark Truex Jr. could also retire at the end of this season. There's a lot of rumors and rumors that Mark Truex Jr., this could be his final year with the team. There could be a chance that they downsize at the end of this year. Obviously, going back to those Stewart Haas Racing rumors, I think they're going to sell a charter like team like 23XI. And even I mentioned Junior Motorsports. They're interested in moving up. I know they keep denying it because of the charters not being finalized and the charters being expensive. But with the charter market being downsized from $40 million to potentially $25 million, with all the teams that are rumored to be downsizing or changing potentially, we may see some other teams make some moves. And I think Front Row is another team that could be making some moves. But when I hear the word wild, I could see some other crazy stuff happening. How much longer is Kyle Busch going to be at RCR? That's something to watch for. Are we going to see more supercar drivers come over? Is Cam Waters going to jump over full time? Because we know that he's interested potentially. And could we see Will Brown come over more times? They'll be very interesting to see what happens with this year's silly season and what moves end up happening. But it sounds like there's some big moves happening. And I think SHR downsizing is one of those rumors, which we'll talk about later this week. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Preece. Now, if you were on social media last night, Toby Chrissy put out a tweet indicating that Noah Gragson stated to the media earlier this week that him, Chase Briscoe, and Josh Berry have started a study group to get their team better. You know who wasn't mentioned in that study group? Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece actually called out his teammates about that study group, saying a study group that I was not part of. Obviously, when you hear that Ryan Preece is not invited to a study group, and I would imagine it's not just that Noah Gragson started, I'd imagine that Chase Briscoe was involved and Josh Berry was involved, but I also imagine that Gene Haas and Tony Stewart were involved in this as well. There is a lot of chatter going on behind the scenes that Stewart Haas Racing could be downsizing their program from a 4-car team, like I mentioned earlier, to a 3-2-car team. And unfortunately, Ryan Preece has not only been the weak link at Stewart Haas Racing over the course of the last couple years, but also Ryan Preece has no funding going to the team. Noah Gragson, Josh Berry, and Chase Briscoe all bring funding to the organization and team. So if they downsize their 3-car program, that unfortunately means it's the end for Ryan Preece at the team. And sadly, I think Ryan Preece is no longer going to be driving for Stewart Haas Racing, which is a shame. I don't think Ryan Preece is fully at fault for the performance of the 41 car. Before Ryan Preece got in that team, Cole Custer drove the 41 car. And let's be real and honest, Cole Custer really did not do much. He's gone back to Xfinity and done a pretty good job. And then, of course, you have other drivers like Kurt Busch who did a pretty good job in that car, but Daniel Suarez didn't do absolutely amazing. But Ryan Preece, I feel, has been kind of like the black sheep at SHR this year. And obviously, like I said, he only signed a one-year extension with Stewart Haas Racing. And although all the other drivers are under contracts for multiple years and multiple seasons, though Chase Briscoe is currently in an option year. Now, if Ryan Preece does not, in fact, return to Stewart Haas Racing next year, what does this mean for him? He could go back to modifieds. That certainly is possible. He could potentially go to the Wood Brothers. I've heard a lot of chatter that Harrison Burton may not be returning to the team in 2025. And you look at Harrison Burton, right? Harrison Burton has absolutely been struggling at the Wood Brothers the last few years. He's getting worse every single year. He's down to 33rd in the points and only has had 2 finishes inside the top 15 and 1 finish inside the top 10 and 5 top 10s in his whole entire Cup Series career. Meanwhile, the driver he replaced, Matt DiBenedetto, did a lot better in the Wood Brothers. So I think Ryan Preece would be a much better fit, and I could see him going there, but I also could see Chase Briscoe potentially going there next season as well. There's also some other teams to look out for. Rick Ware Racing. Rick Ware Racing could be having some changes. There's a chance that Justin Healy could be going full-time over to RFK in 2025. Ryan Preece has driven for Rick Ware Racing in the past and has done a very solid job with the team and organization. I think he would do a very good job with Rick Ware Racing. I think he ran top 20 at Dover, so I certainly could see him running well with their team. They've gotten a lot better. And then, of course, you have other rumors and rumblings of teams. He could go back to Xfinity. He could go to a team like AM Racing if Haley Deegan somehow in some crazy way, shape, or form moves up next year. I do think that there is going to be some movement with Ryan Preece. And I do feel for Ryan Preece because we've seen what he can do in the lower series. He won multiple races with Joe Gibbs Racing in the 18 car. And then we've seen him win races and won the 20 car as well. And he also has won races in the truck series for DGR, or what now is Tricon Garage. He's won races of that team and organization. He got a couple wins in Nashville and only had 1 finish outside the top 10 the whole entire time. I think Ryan Preece 100% deserves to be in the Cup Series. He's got the talent and he's got the capabilities. The problem is, like I said, he doesn't bring the sponsorship and funding to the table. We've seen Haas Automation fund out of pocket. I know he's got United Rentals that is backing him currently at the moment, but unfortunately, I just think that Ryan Preece's time at Stewart Haas Racing is sadly and likely coming to an end. Especially, like I said, with the rumors are going to downsize. I think that Ryan Preece is going to be going to another organization. If you want my early prediction, I think he might be full-time Xfinity next year. If RFK decides to expand to Xfinity, I think he goes there potentially, and then he goes part-time with Rick Ware Racing. And maybe front row could be another potential if they expand, but I think Ryan Preece, regardless, will not be in the Cup Series. And there's going to be no replacement because that 41 charter is likely being sold. We know that Gene Haas is looking to get out of the sport currently at the moment, so obviously I think there's some big changes that are coming going into next year. Nonetheless, disappointing here about with Ryan Preece's situation. I get being upset and frustrated that you don't feel like you're included in the situation. It's kind of telling. It's kind of like a bad way of saying, hey, we're no longer including you in these situations, and we probably are not going to have you at the team next year. So like I said, I think Ryan Preece is out at SHR at the end of the year. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding, and he didn't know about it, but if you want my honest opinion, I do think that Ryan Preece is no longer going to be driving for SHR in 2025 and probably will be out of the team at the end of the season. So that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below with that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Ryan Preece is actually out of SHR? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think that SHR is going to downsize? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have the NASCAR silly season update discussing all the silly season rumors and rumblings that have been going on recently. Then on Wednesday, we'll have a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel. We'll have Truck, Xfinity Series, and Cup Series race picks this week as well as to get you set up for Darlington. Got a ton of great content dropping on the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.